Steve Harvey had hosted Family Feud for over 15 years, navigating thousands of episodes with his signature blend of humor, warmth, and genuine engagement with the families who appeared on his stage. Throughout his extensive career in television, he had witnessed the complete spectrum of human emotion and family dynamics, from heartwarming celebrations of unity to uncomfortable moments when underlying tensions surfaced during the pressure of competition. However, nothing in his considerable experience could have prepared him for what would unfold on that warm April afternoon in 2024, when a seemingly innocent question about forgotten anniversaries would trigger an unexpected response from a wife that would leave the studio audience stunned, move Steve Harvey to genuine emotion, and ultimately deliver one of the most powerful lessons about grace, forgiveness, and the true meaning of marriage that had ever been presented on his stage. The Mitchell family from Atlanta, Georgia, stood ready to compete against the Santos family from Miami, Florida, both families presenting an outward appearance of enthusiasm and unity as they prepared to participate in America's most beloved game show. Yet beneath the surface of rehearsed smiles and coordinated outfits, a moment of genuine human connection was about to occur that would transcend the boundaries of entertainment and speak to fundamental truths about relationships, forgiveness, and what truly matters when building a life with another person. If you value authentic stories about families demonstrating grace under pressure and the power of choosing love over resentment, please take a moment to engage with this content by hitting the like button and subscribing to our channel for more powerful narratives about real families navigating real challenges with wisdom and compassion. James and Rachel Mitchell had been married for 25 years, a quarter-century of shared life that had included the inevitable mixture of joy and struggle, triumph and disappointment, deep connection and occasional friction that characterized any long-term partnership between two imperfect people trying to build something meaningful together. James was 52 years old, a high school history teacher whose passion for education had defined his professional life, even as the demands of teaching had sometimes created tension with his family responsibilities. Rachel, 49, had worked for 2 decades as a nurse in the intensive care unit at Grady Memorial Hospital, her career demanding irregular hours and emotional investment that had required James to take on significant parenting and household responsibilities throughout their marriage. Their children completed the family lineup on the Family Feud stage. 23-year-old Michael had recently graduated from college and was beginning his career in software engineering, proud to represent his family on national television. 20-year-old Sarah was a junior at the University of Georgia, studying environmental science and excited about the opportunity to appear on her favorite game show with her parents and siblings. 17-year-old David, the youngest, was a high school senior preparing for his own college journey and thrilled to share this experience with his family before leaving home. To any observer, the Mitchell family appeared to be exactly what they were, a close-knit unit that had navigated the normal challenges of raising children, managing careers, and maintaining a marriage through 2.5 decades of life together. What made the Mitchell family unique was not some hidden crisis or dramatic dysfunction, but rather the quiet strength and resilience that had characterized their approach to marriage and partnership throughout the years. James and Rachel had learned early in their relationship that sustaining a marriage required conscious choice and daily recommitment, rather than relying on initial romantic feelings or assuming that love would automatically overcome all obstacles without effort and intention. They had faced financial struggles when both were starting their careers and raising young children on modest salaries. They had navigated health crises when Rachel had been diagnosed with breast cancer 12 years earlier, facing the terrifying uncertainty of treatment and recovery together. They had weathered periods when the demands of work and parenting had left little energy for their relationship, requiring deliberate effort to maintain connection and intimacy despite exhaustion and competing priorities. Through all these challenges, James and Rachel had developed a partnership characterized by mutual respect, clear communication about needs and expectations, and a shared commitment to working through difficulties rather than allowing resentment to build or problems to fester unaddressed. They had attended marriage counseling during particularly stressful periods, recognizing that seeking help was a sign of strength rather than failure. They had established patterns of regular date nights and annual anniversary trips that prioritized their relationship even when schedules and budgets made such investments challenging. They had learned to apologize genuinely when they hurt each other, and to forgive without keeping score of past grievances. They had built a marriage that their children observed and learned from, modeling the kind of partnership that required work, but offered deep rewards of companionship, support, and shared purpose. The Family Feud appearance had been arranged as a celebration of the Mitchell family's 25th wedding anniversary, which had occurred just 3 weeks before the taping. Michael had submitted their application months earlier, hoping to create a special memory for his parents to commemorate their quarter-century together. The timing had worked out perfectly, and the entire family had traveled to Los Angeles excited about the opportunity to compete together and celebrate this significant milestone in James and Rachel's relationship. However, what the children did not know, and what Rachel had chosen not to share with anyone outside her marriage, was that James had actually forgotten their 25th wedding anniversary when the date arrived 3 weeks earlier. He had been consumed with end-of-year responsibilities at school, managing final exams and grades while also coordinating a major historical research project with his advanced placement students. The anniversary had fallen on a weekday during the most demanding period of the academic calendar, and James had simply lost track of the date amid the chaos of professional obligations and daily routines. He had arrived home that evening with no card, no gift, no acknowledgement of the significance of the day, completely unaware that it was their anniversary until Rachel quietly mentioned it after dinner. The realization of what he had forgotten hit James with devastating force. This was not just any anniversary, but their 25th, a major milestone that deserved special recognition and celebration. Rachel had been looking forward to acknowledging this achievement together, marking a quarter-century of partnership and all they had overcome and built during those years. James's oversight felt to him like a terrible failure, a demonstration that he had allowed work to crowd out what should have been his priority, that he had taken Rachel for granted in a way that was inexcusable regardless of how busy or stressed he might have been. James had immediately apologized profusely, recognizing that there was no adequate excuse for forgetting such an important date. He had offered to plan something special for the following weekend, to make up for his oversight with a belated celebration that would demonstrate his recognition of the milestone and his appreciation for Rachel and their marriage. He had been prepared for anger, hurt, or resentment that would have been entirely justified given the significance of what he had forgotten and the message that his forgetfulness might send about his priorities and his value of their relationship. Rachel's response had surprised James and revealed something profound about the character she had developed through 50 years of life and 25 years of marriage. Rather than expressing anger or hurt, Rachel had simply smiled and told James that she appreciated his apology and his desire to celebrate belatedly, but that his forgetfulness did not diminish her sense of their marriage's value or strength. She reminded him that they had spent 25 years supporting each other through far more significant challenges than a forgotten anniversary, that she knew he loved her and valued their marriage based on decades of demonstrated commitment rather than a single date on the calendar, that she understood the pressures he was under at work and did not measure his love by his ability to remember specific dates amid legitimate demands on his time and attention. Rachel had explained to James that early in their marriage, she probably would have been hurt and angry about such an oversight, would have interpreted it as evidence that he did not care enough about her or their relationship, would have allowed resentment to build, and would have struggled to forgive what felt like neglect or taking her for granted. However, 25 years of shared life had taught her to distinguish between genuine character flaws or relationship problems versus simple human error and forgetfulness that occurred even in the strongest partnerships. She had learned that holding grudges and keeping score of mistakes was far more damaging to a marriage than the mistakes themselves, that choosing grace and forgiveness created space for both partners to be human and imperfect without fear that every failure would be catalogued and held against them indefinitely. James had been moved by Rachel's response and her willingness to extend grace rather than judgment. Her reaction had reinforced his love and respect for her, demonstrating the emotional maturity and wisdom she had gained through years of navigating life's challenges with resilience and perspective. They had celebrated their anniversary the following weekend with a special dinner and meaningful conversation about their 25 years together. The celebration made richer by the reminder that their marriage was strong enough to withstand human imperfection, and that their commitment to each other was based on substance rather than perfect execution of romantic gestures and calendar observance. The game began with the characteristic energy and production quality that had made Family Feud beloved by audiences for generations. Steve Harvey engaged both families with his practiced warmth and humor, creating an atmosphere of fun competition that allowed contestants to relax and enjoy the experience of being on national television. The Mitchell family performed well in the opening rounds, with various family members contributing correct answers and the entire group demonstrating the comfortable teamwork that came from genuine affection and years of shared experiences. It was during the third round that the question appeared which would lead to the moment that shocked the audience and moved Steve Harvey to genuine emotion. The question seemed routine enough, the kind of lighthearted query about marriage and relationships that Family Feud frequently featured to generate amusing responses and relatable content for viewers. Steve Harvey read the question with his usual dramatic flair, building anticipation before revealing what the families would be attempting to answer. The survey question addressed a common marital frustration that many couples could relate to and that typically generated responses ranging from humorous to exasperated. Steve announced the question clearly, his voice carrying through the studio with practiced showmanship. The survey had asked 100 married women to complete the following statement: "The thing my husband always forgets is blank." The question was designed to elicit answers about common male forgetfulness, the kind of minor irritations that wives experienced regularly in their marriages. Expected responses might include taking out the trash, picking up items from the grocery store, important dates like birthdays or anniversaries, appointments that required his attendance, or tasks he had promised to complete around the house. These were the types of relatable answers that made Family Feud appealing to broad audiences, acknowledging the small frustrations of married life in ways that felt familiar and humorous rather than genuinely problematic or concerning. James Mitchell hit the buzzer first, winning the opportunity to provide the initial answer for his family. Steve Harvey turned to him with an encouraging smile, ready for what would likely be a standard response about forgotten chores or missed appointments. The studio audience waited with pleasant anticipation, expecting to hear James acknowledge some common male failing in a self-deprecating way that would be both honest and amusing. James considered the question for just a moment before providing his answer with a slightly embarrassed but good-natured tone. He offered what seemed like an obvious and highly likely response based on common experiences in long-term marriages. James stated clearly and without hesitation that the thing husbands always forget is their anniversary. The answer was met with knowing laughter and nods of recognition from the studio audience, many of whom had personal experience with forgotten anniversaries, either as the forgetful party or the disappointed spouse waiting for acknowledgement that never arrived. Steve Harvey smiled and turned to check the board, clearly expecting this common answer to appear and score significant points for the Mitchell family. The board revealed that anniversary was indeed the #1 answer, appearing at the top with 48 points, reflecting how frequently this response had been given by the surveyed women. Steve Harvey announced the result with his characteristic enthusiasm, congratulating James on identifying the top answer and putting the Mitchell family in strong position to win the round. The studio audience applauded appropriately, and the game appeared ready to continue in standard fashion with additional family members providing other common answers about male forgetfulness. However, what happened next transformed the moment from routine game show content into something far more meaningful and powerful. Rachel Mitchell stepped forward from her position at the family podium, raising her hand to get Steve Harvey's attention in a gesture that suggested she wanted to say something beyond simply providing the next answer in the game sequence. Steve noticed her raised hand and the earnest expression on her face, and something in her demeanor made him pause and give her space to speak rather than immediately moving forward with the standard game progression. Steve approached Rachel with his microphone extended, clearly sensing that whatever she wanted to say went beyond typical game show banter or family celebration. The studio audience quieted with interest, curious about what had prompted Rachel to interrupt the normal flow of gameplay. The other Mitchell family members looked at Rachel with some confusion, uncertain about what she intended to say or why she had chosen this moment to speak up. Rachel spoke directly to Steve Harvey, but with sufficient volume that her words carried throughout the studio and would later reach millions of viewers watching at home. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying none of the anger or resentment that might have been expected given what she was about to reveal. She told Steve that she wanted to share something about her husband's answer, something that the audience might find interesting or meaningful in the context of the question about what husbands forget. Rachel explained that James's answer about forgetting anniversaries was not merely theoretical or based on general male tendencies, but was actually drawn from recent personal experience. She revealed that just 3 weeks earlier, James had forgotten their 25th wedding anniversary, a major milestone that should have been impossible to overlook, but that had somehow slipped his mind amid the demands and distractions of his work responsibilities and daily routines. The studio audience gasped at this revelation, the collective sound reflecting shock and sympathetic dismay for Rachel having experienced such a significant oversight from her husband on such an important occasion. There was immediate expectation that Rachel was about to express hurt or anger about this failure, that she would use this public platform to shame James, or to articulate legitimate grievance about being taken for granted or having her importance in his life minimized by his inability to remember even the most significant date in their shared history. What Rachel said next, however, shocked the audience in an entirely different way and transformed the moment from one of expected conflict or complaint into something far more powerful about grace, forgiveness, and mature understanding of what truly mattered in marriage and partnership. Rachel continued speaking with the same calm clarity, her words carrying genuine emotion but no trace of bitterness or resentment. She acknowledged that, yes, James had forgotten their 25th anniversary, which could reasonably have been interpreted as hurtful or evidence of not caring sufficiently about their marriage or her feelings. However, Rachel wanted everyone to understand something important about her reaction to that forgetfulness and what it revealed about the nature of their 25-year partnership. Rachel explained that she had chosen not to be angry or hurt about James forgetting their anniversary, because she had learned through 2.5 decades of marriage that a single forgotten date told her nothing meaningful about the strength of their relationship or the depth of James's love and commitment to her. She described how James had been there for her during her battle with breast cancer, sitting beside her through every chemotherapy session, helping her through the physical and emotional challenges of treatment, never wavering in his support even when she was at her most vulnerable and frightened. She recounted how James had taken on additional household responsibilities throughout their marriage to accommodate her irregular nursing shifts, ensuring their children were cared for, and the home was managed even when her work schedule made her less available than she would have preferred. Rachel continued by highlighting how James had supported her professional ambitions and personal growth, encouraging her to pursue advanced certifications in her nursing career, even when doing so required sacrifice and adjustment from the entire family. She spoke about the countless small acts of love and service that James performed regularly without fanfare or expectation of recognition, the ways he demonstrated his commitment and care through daily choices and priorities, rather than through grand gestures or perfect remembrance of calendar dates. Rachel's voice grew stronger with conviction as she articulated the central insight that had shaped her response to James's forgetfulness. She explained that she had realized over the years that keeping score of mistakes and failures was corrosive to marriage, that holding on to resentment about human imperfection created far more damage than the original oversight or error ever could. She had learned that grace and forgiveness were not signs of weakness or acceptance of being treated poorly, but rather were powerful choices that created space for both partners to be imperfect humans who occasionally failed despite good intentions and genuine love. Rachel turned to look directly at James as she concluded her statement, her words now addressed to him as much as to the audience and Steve Harvey. She told him that she wanted him to know that forgetting their anniversary had not hurt her or diminished her sense of being valued and loved, because she measured his love by 25 years of demonstrated commitment rather than by his ability to remember a specific date. She told him that she forgave him completely and without reservation, that she held no resentment or disappointment, that she knew who he was and what their marriage meant to him based on far more substantial evidence than anniversary observance. The studio audience had fallen into complete silence during Rachel's statement, absorbed in the unexpected wisdom and grace being demonstrated before them. When Rachel finished speaking, there was a moment of profound quiet before the audience erupted into sustained applause that was qualitatively different from typical game show audience response. This was not applause for entertainment or humor, but rather recognition of genuine wisdom and emotional maturity being displayed in a setting that typically featured far more superficial content. Steve Harvey stood motionless during Rachel's statement, his expression reflecting deep emotion and genuine admiration for what he was witnessing. When the audience applause finally subsided, Steve approached Rachel with visible moisture in his eyes and spoke with unmistakable sincerity about what her words meant and why they mattered beyond the context of a game show or entertainment television. Steve told Rachel that in his 15 years of hosting Family Feud and his decades in entertainment and public life, he had rarely witnessed such a powerful demonstration of what real marriage looked like and what it meant to choose grace over grievance. He acknowledged that Rachel would have been entirely justified in being hurt or angry about James forgetting their 25th anniversary, that most people would have responded with disappointment or resentment that could have poisoned the relationship for weeks or months. However, Rachel had chosen a different path, one that required wisdom and emotional maturity that came only through years of intentional growth and conscious choice to prioritize relationship health over being right or nursing justified complaints. Steve shared briefly about his own journey through multiple marriages and the hard lessons he had learned about the difference between keeping score of failures versus extending grace and forgiveness that allowed both partners to be imperfect without fear of permanent judgment or relationship dissolution. He spoke about the destructive nature of resentment and the liberating power of forgiveness, not as abstract concepts, but as practical realities that determined whether marriages thrived or slowly died under the weight of accumulated grievances and unforgiving scorekeeping. Steve turned to address James directly, acknowledging that James was married to a remarkable woman who had just demonstrated extraordinary grace and wisdom in her response to his forgetfulness. He told James that he should recognize the gift he had been given in Rachel's forgiveness and her mature understanding of what truly mattered in their marriage. He also gently suggested that while Rachel had extended grace about the forgotten anniversary, James should perhaps set some reminders on his phone to ensure that such an important date did not slip his mind again in the future, generating laughter from the audience at this practical advice, wrapped in the serious conversation about forgiveness and grace. James was visibly emotional, tears streaming down his face as he listened to Rachel's public affirmation of their marriage and her explicit forgiveness of his oversight. When Steve invited him to respond, James struggled to speak through his emotion but managed to express his profound gratitude for Rachel and for the grace she had extended not just in this instance, but throughout their 25 years together. He acknowledged that her response to his forgetfulness had reinforced why he had fallen in love with her decades earlier, and why he remained grateful every day for the life they had built together despite his imperfections and occasional failures. The Mitchell children stood watching their parents with visible emotion, clearly moved by this public demonstration of the strength and maturity of their parents' relationship. This was a powerful lesson about marriage and forgiveness being modeled for them in the most unexpected setting, delivered not through lecture or instruction, but through genuine human interaction and their mother's choice to respond to disappointment with grace rather than grievance. Steve Harvey made a decision in that moment to use this unexpected development as a teaching opportunity that went far beyond typical game show content. He addressed the studio audience and the cameras directly, speaking about the importance of Rachel's example and what it could teach anyone in a long-term relationship about priorities, perspective, and the choices that determined whether marriages flourished or failed under the weight of human imperfection. Steve explained that every marriage included moments of disappointment, oversight, and failure from both partners, because marriage joined together two imperfect humans who would inevitably hurt each other despite good intentions and genuine love. The question was not whether such failures would occur, but rather how partners chose to respond when they did. Couples could choose to keep score of every mistake and build resentment that eventually poisoned the relationship beyond repair. Or they could choose grace and forgiveness that acknowledged human imperfection while maintaining commitment to the relationship and the partner despite failures and disappointments. Steve emphasized that Rachel's choice to forgive James and to publicly affirm their marriage despite his forgotten anniversary was not weakness or acceptance of being treated poorly, but rather was strength and wisdom that came from understanding what truly mattered in sustaining a partnership across decades of shared life. Her response demonstrated emotional maturity that many people never achieved regardless of how long they remained married. The ability to distinguish between genuine relationship problems that required confrontation and resolution versus simple human error that required grace and forgiveness. The game eventually resumed after this extended moment of genuine emotion and wisdom being shared in an unexpected setting. The Mitchell family went on to win their match against the Santos family, though the victory felt secondary to the more significant moment that had occurred when Rachel chose to publicly demonstrate grace and forgiveness rather than hurt or resentment. The episode, when it aired, became one of the most talked about in Family Feud history, not because of drama or conflict, but because of the unexpected wisdom and emotional maturity displayed by a wife choosing love over grievance in response to her husband's very human failure. The response from viewers was immediate and overwhelming in its positivity and gratitude for witnessing such a powerful example of healthy marriage dynamics. Social media filled with people sharing their own stories of choosing forgiveness over resentment in their relationships, of learning to extend grace to imperfect partners, of recognizing that keeping score of mistakes was far more destructive than the mistakes themselves. Marriage counselors and relationship experts praised the episode as demonstrating principles they work to teach clients, but that were rarely modeled so clearly and powerfully in public settings. For the Mitchell family specifically, the Family Feud appearance became a cherished memory and a reminder of the strength of James and Rachel's partnership. The episode aired just before their actual 26th anniversary, and James made absolutely certain to plan a special celebration that acknowledged not just the milestone, but his profound gratitude for Rachel's grace and the remarkable woman she had become through 5 decades of life and 25 years of marriage to him. Steve Harvey spoke about the Mitchell family in subsequent interviews as an example of what he hoped to highlight through Family Feud beyond simple entertainment: the opportunity to witness and celebrate genuine human goodness, wisdom, and the kinds of character strengths that sustained families and relationships through inevitable challenges and imperfections. He kept in periodic contact with James and Rachel, checking in on their marriage and their family, and expressing his continued admiration for how they had modeled grace and forgiveness in such a public and powerful way. If this story has reinforced your understanding of the power of forgiveness in relationships, the importance of choosing grace over grievance when partners inevitably fail, and the wisdom required to distinguish between genuine relationship problems versus simple human imperfection, please take a moment to like this content and subscribe to our channel for more narratives about families demonstrating wisdom and strength through their choices to love despite disappointment and to forgive despite justified hurt.